Hey YouTube, how's it going? Monday morning in lovely downtown Indianapolis, Indiana. See if we get anybody in here before I start. See if I can get us on my tablet so I can read the comments without squinting at the screen. 3 people in here, alright. So, there I am. Hey Big Bailey, what's up, man? So, that's probably why it took a minute for everybody to get in here, because Pale Rider, you're in here. Because the ads. Hey Dan, welcome. I don't do too many of these live chats, but I figured I'd do this on YouTube instead of Periscope. So here's what I've been through today. So, yeah, you got it right there, Skull. So here, I'm gonna avoid looking at the comments for a second. So, this morning I delivered at a place where you deliver pallets, and it's really tight. And if you've watched my Periscope, I kind of showed what it was, and I left the Periscope up. And the yard guy who's sitting there smoking a cigarette, he's not working. I go up to him, and he's spotted the trailer for me before in the past. So I go up to him, like, hey, I think I can get in the door, but I don't know if I can pull out, because they got trailers across from the dock, and you don't quite have enough swing room. Now, if you have to do a 90-degree dock, which I've done before, and not have to unhook, it can be done. But to unhook, that was the challenge. So he's like, well, other Snyder guys do it. I'm like, okay. They're probably driving day cab Freightliners, but okay, So I give it the old, try, college try, I guess you could say. He sees that I'm struggling a little bit, and so I'm in everybody's way. So he finally pull around. I'll put the trailer in. So I put the trailer in, and the same thing. I tried to pull it out. Told him I couldn't pull it out, and he finally, all right, I'll pull it out for you. And this is after the clerk told me that he'd be happy to move the trailer for me. So I get that done. I go across town, and when you're out here long enough, this is why I suggest you have a few years behind your belt before you become an owner-operator, because you're going to discover the places that don't have their act together. And one of 2 scenarios is going to happen. You either have everybody's in a crappy mood because the place sucks to work for, or everybody's in a bad mood because they don't know how to do what they're supposed to do, therefore the place doesn't run efficiently. Therefore, they create their own self-misery. And I can spot these places usually at the front gate, So, I get in line, I'm the second truck in line, and there's a truck in front of me. And the door's open, his driver's door's open, and they're just hanging out. And meanwhile, the lady at the guard shack, she's darting back and forth. She's looking all stressed out, just And so finally, I don't know what transpired. They had to finally cut the seal on his trailer. They didn't have the right cutter, so I'm literally been sitting here for 15 minutes, right? So they finally find the right cutters, which I don't know why it was a challenge, because when I finally went up to the gate, there was like 4 different styles of cutters. It wasn't a bolt seal, it was a wire seal. I was tempted to help them myself, but they found their cutters before I thought to offer them, And I could tell this lady was just like, bad mood, and the yard guy was just kind of like, and he's got this limp, so he's obviously working, hurting, And this is, I'm literally next door to a brand new modern, wide open dock facility, and So so for some reason they dropped the trailer right there in front of me. So had to wait, and that guy was just taking his time with his landing gear, he looks at me and does that, and he is not in any kind of hurry. And not that I'm in a hurry, but I'd like to be able to get to my customer tonight because it's a tight schedule. So he finally, and I'll address the comments here in a second, guys. So finally the trailer gets moved. So I pull up, nobody comes out. So I'm like, well, maybe I'm supposed to go to the gate. There's no signs telling me whether I should get out or should not, Usually there is, but sometimes there's not. So I get there, so I get out of the truck, and I go to open the door, and it's locked. Okay. And I hear this, I have no idea what she said because there's, the airport's nearby. So there's an airline going right over, so jet engine, so I can't hear her. So I just kind of sit out there. Well, I can't go in. So finally, she opens the door. What, are you picking up or dropping off? Told her I'm picking up. So this is supposed to be a drop and hook, by the way. So she's like, what's your pickup number? And she's like, brah, just ready to fight, And I'm pleasant with these people. I try to kill them with kindness, So I told her my pickup number, and she's like, that was scheduled on Friday. Okay, don't kill the messenger, So, and that happens, Sometimes there's a load that doesn't get picked up, so they reschedule it. Sometimes they're notified, sometimes they're not, Hey, Juan. And so I'm just sitting there. She's like, okay, go around the shipping. It's on the out. She tells me where the office is. So I go around, and it's a tight area. And I'm like, okay. So I go in the entrance. Of course, there's nobody in the window. So I'm like, a big sign says, "Do not tap on window." Okay, so that usually means you're gonna stand in the window. You're gonna stand in the window and get ignored, So I forgot to turn my sound off. That's why I don't think I can fix that. Maybe. Oh, you guys will have to deal with that. So finally she gets my now she gets my pickup number. She's miserable. She's hating life. You can just tell. So that's 2 strikes. So should have pounded on the window. And so she's like, okay, drop your trailer in slot 145, and then your trailer is in door 58, but it's not ready. Once you get a green light, then come up and get your paperwork. Pretty simple. Okay. But she's like, I think they're still loading it. Okay. So the load's only supposed to be 9,000 pounds. So now turning around in this area to go back to slot 145 is a little bit of a challenge in and of itself, but I get it done. So I go around. Slot 145 has a trailer in it. So I'm like, you know what? Here's my policy. If you tell me a spot and it's full, that means that you don't have your act together. You're obviously not updating your computers. So I'm going to put that trailer wherever I want. I'm nice about it. So I find a better spot. It was easier to back in anyways. And I went up to the yard guy, and finally a little bit of positivity. He's like, what's going on? I said, well, they told me this slot, but I'm at 112. That's the only spot that's open. He's like, hey, no problem. So he gets on the radio, tells her, okay, no big deal. So I come back around, and the green light's on in my trailer that I'm picking up. So I hook up to it, hook up everything. I walk in there. It's just like, can I help you? Like she's never seen me before. Mind you, I was just there 5 minutes ago. Well, I got a green light. Oh. Well, your load is definitely not ready. And she had this grave look on her face. I'm like, okay, Awesome. So wait, you know, so she leaves. Doesn't tell me anything. So maybe she's going to check to see what the progress is, or maybe it was loaded, you know, or whatever. Now, mind you, I can't tell if this thing's loaded on my suspension gauge because it's only a 9,000 pound load. So I look at my suspension gauge. It's borderline, you know. So, but anyways, I'm sitting there in the office, and then she comes back in like 5 minutes later, and she's like, "What are you still doing here?" I'm like, "Oh, do I need to wait in the truck?" She's like, "Yeah, wait for a red light, then a green light." I'm like, okay. So that brings me to here. If these people don't get me loaded by a certain time, I'm not going to make this trip in one shot. And if I shut down too late, I'm not going to make it on time tomorrow. So this is a 9 a.m. tomorrow in, you know, just south of Joplin, Missouri. And now I know the customer on the other end. I know I can spend the night there, so if I can get in one shot, time doesn't matter. But see, now my 14's sticking away. This is where the E-Log, you know, haters come in. And this is one of the bad aspects of E-Logs, because, you know, my clock's been ticking since 8 o'clock this morning. So if I don't get shut down by 10 tonight, if I shut down at 10, I'm not within 2 hours of the customer, I'm going to be late. Plain and simple. Schneider doesn't let us use the 8-2 split. That's where the 8-2 split comes in handy. So, but I've noticed that when you go into a place and everybody has this crappy attitude, those are the places that always have the biggest headaches. And the places you know, I've been to shippers that are hard to maneuver in, and the trailers are all tight, and you know, it's kind of a cluster, but everybody's nice, and then all the paperwork's in order, the trailer numbers are right, there's no late loads, you know, that kind of thing. And I've noticed that you can tell when a company is miserable to work for. You know, there's a certain water company you can go to, and no matter what part of the country in, they're all miserable because the company is just not run good. So anyways, let's go to the comments, people. So let's go on here. Man, you guys have been busy. All right, got Pale Rider in the house. Dan Murray, new subscriber, thank you. Kevin and Ollie, what's up, dude? Skull, your face when shippers don't have together. I know. Merrick, hello. Skull, Thursoe, what's up? Stretch Nuts, what's up, man? Part-time trucker, what's up, Snorlord? Stretch Nuts. Oh, I love when people at shippers are in a crap mood, like that chick that works at Kingsford in Bell, Missouri. Bell, Missouri. I haven't been there yet. Well, not with Schneider, but I think I've been there like a long time ago. I think I ruined my Volvo bumper at that place. Isn't that right next to Clorox? Thurso says it doesn't take a few years to figure that out. Everybody's so miserable at these places. Yeah, you know, that's the thing, man. You know, when I worked in manufacturing, the people that had the worst attitudes always had the worst luck. And then when I drove a school bus, same thing. The people that were always negative, they always had problems with their students. They always had problems with their buses. You know, and I went in there like just with this positive attitude because it was way better than welding. And, you know, and I don't mind kids. So I actually always had good days over there. You know, attitude goes a long way. So Juan says, good morning, brother. Stretch us. Then you should have pounded on the window. Yeah, you know, what's funny is I went to one place that said, please tap on the window if we don't see you. And I told him, I said, that sign trips me out. She's like, why? I said, because we get yelled at usually for doing that, you know. And you always got that guy that's like, hey, you know, and meanwhile the sign's right there, don't tap on the window. Stretch Nuts, I heard you're going to Traveloco. Care to comment? No. Chai City Trucker, what's up, good sir? What's up, man? Next Gen, how are you doing? Hey, I'm caught up, guys. What's up? So yeah, attitude, you know, in trucking is kind of the same way. Jeffrey, what's up? So what's interesting is that you run into drivers out here that have really bad attitudes. And, you know, and you take a situation like I'm in right now. That's the beauty of self-dispatch, because even though I might be late on this load, that's not my doing. That's not my fault. And I created enough of a cushion that it doesn't screw up my next load. And if it does, no big deal. That's the beauty of working for the Big Orange. I've had to cancel entire weeks, and then within 5 minutes have a new week set up. Stretch nuts. While I'm out, gotta go get my paperwork. Pepsi finally got me loaded. Later, Steve. Later, man. Speaking of bad shippers. So, you know, attitude goes a long way. So I'm not angry. You know, here's the worst that can happen. If they have me sit here for 8 hours, they got a bathroom here, I've got food in the truck, I'll be annoyed, but I can watch Netflix. After 8 hours, I get $350 or 10 hours. I can't remember. Jeffrey, you can correct me on that. If they suddenly knock on my window and say, hey, your load's canceled, that's $150. So I'm gonna get compensated here. Now, Schneider doesn't have the greatest detention pay. It doesn't kick in till 6 hours, and then after that it's like $50. So, you know, you either want to have the load cancel or have it take 10 hours. So I remember there was a load I picked up in Ohio that took yeah, not enough is what it pays. Yeah, you know, because I'm losing a whole day's revenue, you know. So, but I remember one time in Ohio, I actually had to spend the night at the customer, so I got like $350 on top of what the load already paid. Actually, was a pretty decent payday. So, John Cater, what's up, man? So, I'm looking at this flock of geese, trailers everywhere. You know, while I was checking in, there's like 8 trucks behind me. So it's just one of these places that just, everybody's overstressed, overworked, and, you know, Matthew Bronk, detention doesn't start for IC load till 5 hours. That's crazy. 6 hours. No, I don't have a red light. So I'm thinking, you know, the plate is not dropped or anything. So I'm thinking like here about an hour, you know, because it's lunchtime, you know, in this part of the world. I don't know when their exact lunchtime is, but it is, you know, it's 12:47 here. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. No, I'm not Novitz. But yeah, I haven't had a red light yet. So that's why I was like thinking that she might be checking the trailer, because like I said, this load, according to my assignment, is only 9,000 pounds. Well, that's barely going to register on my suspension gauge. So I could be loaded right now and they wouldn't know it and I wouldn't know it, because we're all just sitting here, you know, and I can't go back there to look. Well, maybe I can. Maybe I can, like, you know, I used this trick one time. I wanted to see how well I was loaded, so I took my cell phone and I set it on timer mode, and then I put the flash on it and I took a picture of the trailer where I couldn't see, kind of like the old mirror prison trick where you put the mirror outside the door and look to see if anybody's coming. I did the same thing, and that's how I could tell it was loaded. I might do that here in a little bit after this live video. So that's a little trick for you guys. If you know, if you can't see inside the trailer, take your cell phone, set on timer, set the flash on, and then stick your hand up there, take the picture, and then bring it out, and you should be able to see inside your trailer what it looks like. So, hey Butch, what's up? Jeffrey Light, Gary headed to Wisconsin. and they wonder why people go postal with a hammer. Right. You know, there's a shipper I go to all the time in Illinois. It's kind of a pain in the butt to get in and out, but everybody was so pleasant there. And when I've had the live load, it didn't take long. Also, your hand on the side for an echo. Yeah, I've done that. I've done the knock, but see, if you've got a light load and there's only like 4 pallets or something, it'll still sound empty. And then if they like load a like pallets, for example, if they put them squeezed together and not against the walls, then it'll still sound a little bit empty. Just got the red light, people. Yeah, just got the red light. So, I don't know if you saw that movement, but slap, slap, yeah. That's a good trick too. That's what I usually do. Usually when I'm looking for an empty, and it's a place where they don't leave the doors open or something, I'll tap on the trailers, and if it sounds hollow, then I'll check the door. That way you're not opening the door on like 5 trailers. Now, something I want to address. So, my last video, I knew it would probably create some drama, but not in the way that I thought it would. So, Buck Wild Trucking, if you guys remember a while back, I did a video of meeting up with him, and he did a live video with me, and and I gave him a CD. We were all cool, and Sunday morning he left a comment on my live video I did Saturday night, and he called me Thor. Now, because we're not close friends, I did not know that he was being sarcastic. So I thought he was going out of his way to tell me that he wasn't going to click on my video, which is kind of a pet peeve of mine, to go out of your way to tell somebody that you don't like them, or to go out of your way to tell somebody that, oh, I'm not going to click on your video. I'm not going to, like in the band, you're always passing out free promo CDs. And you give somebody a CD, like, well, I'm not going to listen to this. I'm just going to throw it away. It's like, it's just like they almost get like a, I don't know, they want to see a reaction. I thought that's what he was doing, not realizing that he was kidding around. And I went off on him in a comment. It's all been deleted. So, Thor did a response on Facebook about the whole, you're weak if you're suicidal kind of thing. And he said he was kidding in the text. People, here's the thing. Text, you can't tell sarcasm. Text, you can't tell when you're kidding sometimes. And if I don't know you very well, then that's a problem. So if you see a I Hate Snorlord video from Buck Wild, then you know why. So, because I went off on him because I thought he was attacking me, and and I deserve it a little bit because I did a parody of these guys that do 2-hour long videos. And what did I do? I did my 3rd live video. It's 1 hour and 22 minutes. So Jeffrey Like is laughing at me. Hey Jeffrey, did you notice the super chat button's on there? Oh wait, you got an iPhone, so you probably don't see that. So, text is very hard to read emotion. Exactly. That's why you don't argue with your spouse in text, because, you got to be real careful, But, they're loading me now, so that's cool. So, it's what I suspected. It was lunchtime probably, So I'm always trying to nice with these people. Next Gen says Ron is good at letting shit go. It'll be all right. Well, I hope so. I try not to let it bother me, but it happens. But here I am talking about positive, being positive and stuff, and then I just went off on somebody. So, but here's the thing. So, because I'm not stressed, because I don't, I'm not really too worried about everything. And that's the beauty of having the lower truck payment, is that this is not going to make or break me. You know, if you got a Snyder Finance truck, sometimes one day like this can make you go in the hole. But 99% of the time, you can recover. There's been times where I've had to get rid of my whole week because of one load, and then I rebook an hour later the entire week, and I actually made more money. That was one of the things that Jeff told me before I came over here, because at Landstar, you lose a load or break the chain. If you've booked 5 loads ahead, which normally you don't do, but let's say you did, that's 5 agents that you're going to have to call and say, hey, I can't pick up your load. So you either like don't break the chain, or you're going to make 5 different agents angry. And they say on the phone, oh, we understand, it happens, blah, 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 but that's still a mark against you, you know? So here it's like, no big deal. Hell, this could have been a canceled load that was supposed to have been picked up Friday. You know, but obviously it wasn't ready Friday, or else I wouldn't be starting to be loaded right now. So I could have flown off the deep end. I could have been, you know, angry and cursing these people out. I could have a crappy attitude about it, but I'm not, because I'm not stressed about it. I'm in a good area that if I did lose the load, I can easily recover. You know, and that's the thing. I favorite like 4 or 5 loads, then I'll book something. I'll keep those favorites on there just in case something goes south. And see, that's the true test of how you run your business, or a good company if you're a company guy, is how do they handle situations like this? You know, Uber has a good detention or truck order not used rate. You know, they know that crap happens. They know that owners lose money, or drivers, whether they're owners or not, they lose money if something happens like that. No point in being stressed out. It only hurts yourself. You're correct, Next Gen. Always have a plan B. Yep. You know, what's interesting is you got to do your own math when you book these loads too, because this 0 mile deadhead was actually 28 miles. It's 28 miles to cross from one side of Indy to the other. But on paper it's 0 miles. So, but now don't get me wrong. I've beaten the steering wheel before. I've yelled. You know, I'll tell you another story since you guys like my story. So I was still new. I was still green. And I had to deliver somewhere in, I think it was Baltimore. And it was one of those docks that you couldn't be straight. So you're basically at an L shape when you hit the dock. Well, you got to turn just right to make that happen. And I could not do it to save my life. I tried, and now I've got a whole audience. I've got 3 other drivers looking at me. I've got all the shipper receiver guys, just kind of, you know, forklift guys sitting there, you know, I've got an audience. And I'm just cursing, I'm beating up the steering wheel, just in this rage, right? So I get out and I go, I can't do this. And there was another Transland driver beside me. And he goes, well, if you unhook, I can do it with my truck, but I can't do it in your truck. Because he had a Volvo, I had a Peterbilt. So I'm like, no, give me a second. Okay, and this is important, guys. This is the important part. So I got in the truck, took a deep breath, counted to 10. Got it in the first time. Sometimes you got to take that moment to breathe. Sometimes you got to take that moment to calm yourself down. Does everybody remember the infamous USA truck video where the driver kind of lost his mind and was trying to turn around because there was a 12-7 bridge in front of him? And you look at the video and all he had to do was back up like 50 feet and he could have made the U-turn. But, you know, he gets out of the truck and he's tearing the crap out of it, and he's, you know, the fairing's coming off, the drive line's getting messed up, and he's like literally out of the truck, you know, just like, he's losing it. And see, sometimes your mind is the biggest, worst enemy for you out here. You can't control the traffic. You can't control the shippers. You can't control DOT. You can't control the weather. The only thing you got control is this, your head. And if you can't control this, you're done. And I always went with my trainees and I always told them, you got a panic point. There's going to be a point when you're going to panic. And you got to keep yourself from getting to that point. There was a time where I was in Shreveport, Louisiana, and they had these like metal delineators on each side, and they had ground off the sides of the road. So it was real narrow, and you couldn't make left or right turns. And if you had hit the panic point, which I almost did, you would just screw it, run over the delineator, and hope for the best, you know. And these were metal, cement-studded spikes, you know. And so I would have ended up on Twisted Truckers. But, you know, so I just kind of, you know, I beat the steering wheel again, and you know, just calm down. And, you know, that's the other thing. You drive your own truck. If you're in everybody's way, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Another good story is a friend of mine used to drive for rail, and he was doing like a train the trainers class. And so he gets in the busy intersection right in downtown Minneapolis, and he takes the turn too sharp on purpose. This is the trainer, mind you, training other trainers. And he gets out of the, you know, and he stops, and everybody's honking at him, flipping him off, you know, yelling at him, whatever. And he's like, so think about what your trainee's going through at this point. Think about what a new person's going through at this point. Most of them are just going to they're going to annihilate either the pole or another car. They're just going to panic and they're just going to go. So he calmly gets out, tells the two cars behind him you have to back up or go around. And he's just like really nonchalant. Meanwhile, like he's creating mass, you know, hysteria. And he's just like calm, cool, and collected. And my friend said that was a very valuable lesson, because you have to be calm and collected, you know. Nice to see a positive YouTube trucker that's not all drama. Enjoyed Saturday Night Live, Steve. Keep it up, dude. Thank you, Thurso. Michael Kibb, shoot, 25 years out here and I still get like that at times. Always learn. Yeah, and that's the thing. You got to learn when to recognize the things that are going to trigger you. You know, like the depression thing. You know, if I find myself going to the dark places up in here, I'll turn on the satellite radio. I'll turn on the comedy channel. I'll call a friend. Oh no, I used to call a friend because we're not supposed to use our cell phones at Schneider. And I would get, you know, or I'd find an album on Spotify, or you know, I've got CDs in the truck, you know, and it would change my mood, you know. And that's what you want to do. You got to find out what triggers you. So, you know, because here's the thing, the solitude out here can either be your best friend or your worst enemy. Some days it's both, you know. Will I still be in a decent mood 3 hours from now? Maybe not. You know, 3 hours from now I'll be hopefully in St. Louis, and I'll have to get fuel. But, you know, life is too short, man, to really, you know, and think about this, man. We're so insignificant out here, you know. So if the biggest cause, if you watch dash cam crash videos, what's the biggest cause of accidents? It's impatience. Impatience or inattentiveness, you know. I agree, keep up the live vids, love them, great outlook and attitude. I didn't always have this attitude. You know, here's the thing, man. You know, I don't understand the trolls, and that's what Ron got upset about, because I call him a troll. And you know, if you go back in my old videos on my old channel, there was a video I did of like close calls or whatever, and this guy said, this kid, he was a young kid, you know, he's a young kid, he gets on there and he goes, this is the worst video on YouTube. And I did this sarcastic long rant about, oh man, I'm so honored that you think that this is the absolute worst video, because there's a lot of videos on YouTube, you know, and it's just, you know, to go out of your way to tell someone they suck, you know, it's just, why? You know, I'm a live and let live person, man. You know, if what you're doing doesn't affect me, then I don't care, you know. My mistake, Andrew says, my mistakes have helped me be a better trucker. Yeah, I got pissed, but it helped me later. Exactly. You got to learn from your mistakes, you know. When you see a beat up truck, I see someone with a lot of lessons, you know. You know, and that's the beauty of self-dispatch. If I see, say, Springfield to Indianapolis, I know what that load is. And if I'm not in the mood to deal with that yard guy that would rather smoke a cigarette versus, you know, spot my trailer for me, when knowing that we can't get in there anyways, you know, I don't have to do that load. Now, the problem with that load is I didn't mind it until this last time. Schneider shaved off like $150 on the line haul. Don't know why. Don't know if the first time was a mistake, but when I got to the customer, dropped my trailer, you know, I'm sitting there doing the math. It didn't pay that great, and but it was kind of the only thing out of my area, unless I wanted to sit till Tuesday. So it's a lesser of two evils kind of thing. But at least I knew what I was getting into, you know. So let's see how much time I got. I got 11 hours left on my 14, and I'm about 10 hours away at 55 miles an hour. Now, if this load is truly, really 9,000 pounds, I'm gonna book. And I should be able to make it to the customer because I know I can spend the night there. So familiarity becomes an efficiency tool. But, you know, I can't just sit there and do the same 5 loads or I'll never learn. You know, that's one of the things I've had to kind of get out of the habit of. It's like, stretch your legs a little bit, and that way you don't get too complacent. Complacency can be an enemy too. So, but yeah, learn from your mistakes. But hopefully you guys are seeing shippers and receivers that are positive. Now, next gen, you know, let me know if this is correct, but every person I know that drives a tank, the customer is always happy to see you. You're not waiting on a dock. Sometimes you'll wait on the pump or you wait on the tank, but for the most part, you don't have the same kind of like, oh, you're here, you know. And that's kind of interesting. Now, you show up one place and they're like happy you're there. You show up in another place and they're just, oh man, now I gotta work, and now you're their enemy. And then you show up at other places and they're like, oh, we're happy to have you. Here's the $300 bill for lumper fee. You know, and it's just kind of interesting to see the different aspects that you deal with out here. And since we don't eat right, since we don't sleep right, and we deal with a lot of stress on the road, you know, I don't think these customers realize that when we go into that office, we've done everything in our power to do our job right. So we expect the same from everybody else. Well, unfortunately, nobody else is doing their crap right. You know, I think that's what bothers me a little bit is I could be, you know, I planned my trip, I mapped it out, I drove safely here, you know, I did everything by the book, and you know, and it's almost like sometimes you run into a shipper and go, ta-da, you know, because it was such an event to get there, and then they're like, and then you get ignored at the window, or they're like, oh, your load's not ready yet, you know, or it takes them 6 hours to load you. Like, they don't care that you're there, you know. I remember at Transland, I went through hell. It was one of those hell days. I call them video game days. What does Schneider pay a guy that would need a refresher? Got CDL, but been out of the truck for 20 months. Eventually want to get to an IC program. I'm not sure what Schneider pays on that. Where do you live at, Dan Murray? I could help you out. Butch says they have no idea what you have to do to get the load there. Exactly. You know, Jay Cannell talked about hell days. I call them video game days. Here's why. So you're sitting there playing a video game, right? And then someone goes, it's a driving game, and someone goes, okay, bring in the rain. So, rain starts coming, and then someone goes, all right, now bring in the traffic. So now you got traffic, like if you guys ever played the old school game Galaga, it's like every level there's more crap coming at you, and then like, okay, now throw in a couple of deer. Okay, now throw in an accident. Now create a backup. Okay, now throw in some detours. It just keeps stacking and stacking. I call them video game days. And at some point, you got to sit there and you just got to laugh at it. You just got to laugh. And I've gotten to that point. And I, I'll tell my friends, at the end of the night, oh, it's a video game today. When I took a train the trainers class in the Osho, they had a simulator. It was the first time I ever been on a simulator. And within a 5-minute span, you were on the ramp, you had perfect weather, and then you got off the ramp, it was raining, and then it got foggy, and then it was snowing, and then it was hailing, and then the deer ran out in front of you. This all happened in a 5-minute span, and sometimes real life is really like that. Kill the victim mentality, exactly. Dan Murray says Texas. Dallas, Fort Worth. Yeah, you're gonna have to call Snyder on that. If you were near Missouri, I know that that Transland has a really good refresher program. That's kind of what was my specialty. I didn't hardly ever train newbies out of CDL school. I just did refreshers. Do IC drivers pay the lumper fee or the company? Snyder pays the lumper fee. Sometimes they're automatically paid. Sometimes you got to write out comm check. But no, it doesn't come out of our settlement or anything. We never touch it. Snyder's got a really good lumper kind of thing. We call a number. That's it. We call a phone number. You tell them the load number, tell them the amount, tell them the lumper service, their EIN number sometimes. And then within 5 minutes, you got a number that you write on the check. You give it to them. You just got to send in the receipt. Andrew says Snyder will pay for a refresher course. That's what I would do. And then if you do, I think 6 months, then you can become an IC. That's what, I don't know what it's like to work for Snyder as a company driver. I really don't. However, the ICs that come from the company side, they got a little bit of an advantage over somebody from the outside like me, because they already know the system, they already know the check calls, they already know the customers, you already know your region. Like if you're working out of Dallas, you're going to know that whole area, and so you'll know who to avoid right off the bat, who to go to, who not to go to. Because that's the beauty of self-dispatches, because you go to a shipper once, you're like, screw this place, and then you learn to recognize that shipper on the load board. Now a place like Dallas, there's 100 different shippers, so you can always call and say, hey, who's this customer, and they'll tell you. That's what I did when I booked this load. I called them up and say, hey, who's the customer in Missouri? And they told me. I'm like, okay, cool. And I knew I could spend the night there, so I wasn't worried about the sharp time. And then I found the load right out of there that gives a little bit of cushion. So if they don't get me out of here and I don't get to Neosho by noon, well, my next appointment's at 12 or at 2, and so there's some leeway there. There's some cushion there. So, but very rarely do I have 2 live appointments back to back like that, because something always goes wrong, right? But like I said, I don't know much about the Snyder company side, and I only know one driver that was on the company side, and he left. But I don't know if it was a company thing or if he just didn't like the fit, So that's it. I'm gonna end this video so I don't get accused by anybody for making it too long. I just thought I'd kill some time while I was getting loaded, and my suspension gauge is getting up there, so I think they are almost done with me. So I love having a suspension gauge. Peterbilt didn't have that. And it looks like I've got another Schneider truck probably waiting on my door. So everyone, take it easy. Thanks for chatting. Michael, I'm glad you liked the CD, or the recordings. Butch, thank you. Enjoy your day. Garlic and olive oil, Steve. Oh, I've got garlic in the truck. I do not have olive oil unless it's soaked in olive oil. I got a jar of it. Matthew Brunk, have a great day. Steve, thanks. Thurso, nice chat, dude. Drive safe. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. I've always loved doing these live videos. Well, not always. I'm loving doing these live videos. Way better than Periscope, because Periscope, you get random trolls, and there's only like 8 or 9 people at the most. So, all right, guys, take it easy. Thanks, Big Billy. So, you guys, I'll see you next time.